She left home with a promise to return in a few years with enough money to help improve life for everyone in her family. 4 years later, Joanna Demafelis did come home, inside a wooden box, having suffered such a tragic fate that her own mother collapsed at the sight of the coffin. What happened to Joanna in Kuwait is one of the most disturbing cases of domestic worker abuse ever documented. Beaten, tortured, and when her employers were done with her, they shoved her body into a freezer and fled the country, leaving her frozen for over a year before anyone found her. This is the story of Joanna Demafelis. On February 6, 2018, authorities in Kuwait City arrived at an apartment unit to carry out an eviction. The previous tenants had abandoned the property sometime in late 2016, leaving behind their belongings. As they surveyed the unit, everything appeared normal. Furniture left behind, ordinary signs of a hasty departure. But then they noticed something unusual, a large freezer in the corner, still running. Curiosity led them to open it. What the police found inside would haunt them forever. Beneath layers of ice and frost was the unmistakable shape of a human body, twisted, contorted, and crammed into the small space. After witnessing the body, even the most seasoned officers struggled to contain their emotions. Some reportedly wept at the scene. The woman was so frozen that it took hours before they could get fingerprints for identification. When the results came back, they were able to identify their victim, Joanna Demafelis, a 29-year-old Filipina domestic worker who had not been heard from since September 2016. Her body had been in the freezer for over a year. But it wasn't just the callous way in which she had been abandoned. The autopsy revealed the horrifying extent of her suffering. Her body bore signs of prolonged, repeated abuse. Several ribs were broken. Her pelvis and kidneys showed severe trauma. Signs of internal bleeding suggested she had been beaten relentlessly before her death. There were also indications that someone had attempted to strangle her. The forensic evidence painted a picture of a systematic torture at the hands of her employers. But here's what makes this case even more chilling. According to reports, Joanna may not have been dead when she was put in the freezer. Her employer, Nader Assam Asaf, reportedly confessed to police that he stuffed Joanna into the freezer while she was still unconscious, not yet dead. If true, this means Joanna may have frozen to death inside that freezer, alone and helpless. Nader Assam Asaf, a Lebanese man, and his wife, Mona Hassoun, a Syrian woman, had employed Joanna as their live-in maid, and they fled Kuwait in November 2016, shortly after her death. But who was Joanna, and how did she end up so far from home only to meet such a brutal end? Joanna Daniela Demafelis was born on June 24, 1988, in Iloilo City, Philippines. She was the sixth of 9 children born to Cristano and Eva Demafelis, a farming couple who lived in a modest home in Barangay Ferrares, Sara, Iloilo Province. The family leased 2 hectares of rice fields, which served as their primary source of income. It wasn't much, but it was enough, until it wasn't. With 9 mouths to feed, every harvest was stretched thin. Joanna attended Sara National High School, where teachers and classmates remembered her as a hardworking and selfless individual. She often spoke of her dreams, not grand ambitions for herself, but hopes for her family. She wanted to help her siblings achieve their goals. She hoped to lift her parents out of poverty. Her dream was to help others achieve their dreams. After graduating from high school, Joanna didn't pursue further education. Instead, she immediately began working to support her family. In 2013, she found a job as a housekeeper for relatives in Parañaque, Metro Manila. The pay was modest, but her employers were kind, and Joanna was content. She would later recall this period fondly, smiling as she described the family's warmth. Then disaster struck. In November 2013, Super Typhoon Haiyan, known locally as Yolanda, tore through the Philippines. It was one of the most powerful storms ever recorded, killing over 6,300 people and injuring more than 28,000. Millions were affected across multiple provinces. The Demafelis family was among them. The typhoon destroyed their home and submerged the rice fields they had worked for months, wiping out an entire harvest. With no crops to sell and their house in ruins, the family was plunged into debt. They borrowed money from multiple sources just to survive and to begin to repair what they had lost. Joanna's salary as a housekeeper was nowhere near enough to cover these mounting expenses, and she was devastated. Her entire purpose was to help her family, and now they were drowning in debt with no way out. That is when she made a decision that would change the course of her life. For many Filipinos from modest backgrounds, working overseas, particularly in Middle Eastern countries, represents the best chance at financial stability. The wages for domestic workers in places like Kuwait and Saudi Arabia can be 10 times higher than what they would earn at home. By 2016, over 2.24 million Filipinos were working abroad, with 56% of them in the Middle East. Joanna knew the risks. Stories of abuse, exploitation, and even death among overseas Filipino workers were common knowledge. Her family warned her about the dangers, tales of maids being beaten, raped, or killed by their employers. But Joanna was determined. Just a few years, she told them, just long enough to pay off the family's debts and rebuild their lives. Seeing her resolve, her family relented. They pooled their resources to pay the fees required by the recruitment agency. Before she left, Joanna shared her plans. She would use her earnings not only to clear the debt, but also to rebuild their house, restore the rice fields, and send her younger siblings to school. She wanted them to have opportunities she never had. In May 2014, Joanna boarded a plane to Kuwait. She had little with her, some clothes, her documents, and a heart full of hope. The agency placed her with her first employer under a 2-year contract. During this time, she occasionally contacted her family, about 3 times total, each call lasting only 7 to 10 minutes. During the calls, she never complained or mentioned any problems. When her contract ended in 2016, Joanna chose not to return home. The debts weren't fully paid yet. She found a new employer through the agency, a couple living in an apartment in the Ashab district of Kuwait City. Their names Nader Assam Asaf and Mona Hassoun. And this decision would cost Joanna her life. From the beginning, something was wrong. A fellow Filipino worker who lived in the same building befriended Joanna. In their conversations, Joanna confided that she felt constantly watched when she was inside the apartment. She also admitted that her employers had begun physically punishing her, slapping her, hitting her, finding reasons to inflict pain. By September 2016, the abuse had escalated dramatically. Joanna told her friend that the couple would beat her relentlessly, often for no reason at all. They had forbidden her from leaving the apartment under any circumstances. She was trapped. Her friend urged her to report the abuse to the Philippine embassy. Joanna refused. She was terrified of her employers and feared the consequences that a report might bring. That same month, Joanna managed to contact her sister, Griselda, back in the Philippines. She hinted at her suffering, but tried to downplay it, not wanting her parents to worry. Despite everything, she made a promise. She would come home in 2018. She did return in 2018, but not the way anyone had hoped. That phone call in September 2016 was the last time anyone heard from Joanna. Months passed with no word. Her family grew increasingly anxious. She had always called at least once every few months, but now there was only silence. Her phone number was unreachable. Her social media accounts, where she had loved posting photos, had been deleted. Something was terribly wrong. Her family contacted the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration and the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, pleading for help. The agencies attempted to trace Joanna through her recruitment agency, Our Lady of Mount Carmel Global Human Resources Incorporated. What they discovered was alarming. The agency's license had been revoked in June 2016. When they tracked down former administrators, they hit another dead end. Joanna's initial contract had ended, and the agency had no record of her subsequent employment. But here's where the tragedy deepens. According to Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello III, Joanna was reported missing as early as January 2017. The report reached Filipino welfare officials in Kuwait, but they did nothing. No action was taken. No investigation was launched. The officials who received the report simply ignored it. For nearly 2 years, Joanna's family was forced to deal with agonizing uncertainty, not knowing whether their daughter was alive or dead. And all that time, the people who were supposed to help them had simply failed to act. Then came the discovery in that Kuwait City apartment. What investigators uncovered was not just a murder, it was a calculated cover-up. When Kuwaiti authorities investigated, they discovered that Joanna's employers, Nader Asamasaf and Mona Hassoun, had fled Kuwait in November 2016. But before fleeing, they tried to cover their tracks. On November 6, 2016, they reported to Kuwaiti immigration authorities that Joanna had absconded, creating an explanation for her sudden disappearance. It was a lie, a deliberate fabrication designed to make it look like Joanna had escaped on her own, when in reality, she was already dead or dying inside their freezer. But why did authorities finally go to their apartment over a year later? It actually had nothing to do with Joanna. It wasn't even for their unrelated crime of issuing fake checks, which had also caught the attention of the Kuwaiti police. It was because their landlord filed for eviction over unpaid rent. When the landlord obtained a court order to enter the abandoned apartment, no one had any idea what the police would find inside. What they found was the freezer, the body, the truth. With the help of Interpol, a massive international manhunt was launched. Both suspects were eventually arrested in Damascus, Syria, in February 2018. Nader was extradited to Lebanon, while Mona remained in Syrian custody. During the investigation, a disturbing picture emerged. Nader's own mother, who had visited the couple in Kuwait, provided testimony. She revealed that she had witnessed Mona repeatedly assault Joanna, slapping her face, grabbing her by the hair, and slamming her head against the wall, while Joanna begged her to stop. The abuse was so severe that Nader's mother couldn't bear to stay. Nader confessed to stuffing Joanna into the freezer. According to his statement, Mona had become addicted to torturing the young maid. Neighbors corroborated claims of abuse, recalling male voices shouting at Joanna, followed by loud banging sounds. Why didn't anyone intervene? And why did Joanna stay? The answer lies in a system called kafala. In Kuwait and other Gulf states, migrant workers operate under the kafala system, a sponsorship program that ties a worker's visa and legal status directly to their employer. Under the system, workers cannot change jobs, leave the country, or even escape an abusive household without their employer's consent. If Joanna had fled, she would have been classified as an illegal worker. Her residency permit would have been revoked, and she could have faced arrest and deportation. The system effectively traps workers with their employers, creating a power imbalance that enables exploitation and abuse. Neighbors who heard Joanna's suffering were powerless to help her without the consent of Nader and Mona. The kafala system ensured that Joanna had nowhere to turn. And Joanna's case was far from unique. In 2017 alone, the Philippine Embassy in Kuwait received nearly 6,000 complaints of abuse from Filipino workers, including cases of physical violence, sexual harassment, and rape. Joanna was one of many, but her death became the symbol of a broken system. When news of Joanna's death reached the Philippines, it sparked national outrage. Family members collapsed upon hearing the details. The public demanded justice. Then Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte responded swiftly and forcefully. He called Joanna's death a national shame and announced an immediate ban on the deployment of Filipino workers to Kuwait. He offered free flights home for approximately 10,900 Filipinos who had overstayed their visas in the country. Although the ban couldn't affect the roughly 250,000 Filipinos with valid work visas, 60% of whom were domestic workers, it sent a powerful message. Filipinos are not slaves, Duterte declared, lashing out. They come to your country healthy, happy, and full of hope. They should not return lifeless and mutilated. On February 16, 2018, Joanna's remains arrived in Manila. Her sister Jessica broke down in tears, clutching the wooden coffin as it was unloaded from the cargo bay. The following day, the casket reached Iloilo, where her mother Eva pounded on the box, sobbing uncontrollably. The family wore white shirts bearing the words, "Justice for Joanna Demafelis." Government officials attended her funeral, even President Duterte himself. On March 3, 2018, Joanna was laid to rest in her hometown, the place she had dreamed of returning to, happy and prosperous, with her family finally free from debt. As for her killers, on April 1, 2018, the Kuwaiti criminal court found both Nader Assam Asaf and Mona Hassoun guilty of murder and sentenced them to death by hanging. But because both had fled to Syria, they were tried in absentia, meaning the ruling could not actually be enforced. As they couldn't be forced back to Kuwait, each was tried separately in their home country. In September 2019, a Syrian court found Mona guilty of murder, sentencing her to just 8 to 15 years in prison. Nader's case in Lebanon dragged on for years. As of 2023, his trial was reportedly still ongoing, and to this day, no verdict has been publicly announced. Kuwait requested his extradition, but Lebanon refused to hand him over. So while Kuwait sentenced him to death, the reality is this. Mona is serving a prison sentence that could see her released in her 40s. And Nader, his fate remains unknown. Their victim, Joanna Demafelis, was not the first overseas worker to die at the hands of abusive employers. Tragically, she will not be the last. Cases like hers continue to surface with alarming regularity, not only in the Middle East, but around the world. And just recently in Malaysia, a former MasterChef finalist and her ex-husband were sentenced to 34 years in prison for murdering their Indonesian domestic worker. Forensic evidence revealed that the victim, 28-year-old Nur Afia Dang Damin, had been subjected to prolonged torture, including damage to 6 front teeth caused by an attempt to extract them with pliers. These workers leave their homes filled with hope, carrying the dreams of their families on their shoulders. They endure loneliness, homesickness, and grueling work, all for the chance to build a better future. Instead, some find themselves trapped in horrific situations with no method of escape and no one to help them. Joanna Demafelis was 29 years old. She wanted nothing more than to help her family. She faced the cold, uncertain world of adulthood alone, armed only with determination and love for her parents and siblings. She returned to her mother's embrace in 2018, but not warm and smiling as she had promised. She came home cold as ice, sealed in a wooden box after being murdered and abandoned in a freezer for over a year. If you or someone you know is a foreign worker experiencing abuse, please do not stay silent. Reach out to your country's embassy or consulate. Speak to someone you trust. Organizations exist to help migrant workers escape dangerous situations. No dream should cost you your safety. No job is worth your life. You deserve to be respected just as you respect others. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.